It's the 24th of January 2021. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this Monday. This kind of sounds like clown music, which is appropriate for nuclear. It's actually the Naval Academy March. That's a circus. Go and wrecking other countries. Protect your freedoms. How the hell do we ever buy into that one, I wonder? It's pretty easy. Good old public relation campaigns. Atom for Humanity. There's one of them right there. It's A10 Warthog. All it shoots is atoms for humanity. We call them dirty bombs, of course. Did you know that? The only thing the A10 Warthog shoots is dirty bombs, and it shoots 1.5 tons a minute. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of those bad boys, I wonder? Here's some atoms for humanity. We're growing food right alongside of nuclear waste and shipping it to your countries. Give yourselves a pat on the back. You must be pretty proud because you've never done nothing about it. No, Dana, I want to be killed by food I eat from the supermarket. We got a big shot poll for everybody tonight, a big poll. We put the poll up last night, but the nuclear industry took it down a few hours ago. Is Fukushima Daiichi meltdowns radioactive nuclear fallout behind the mass die-offs worldwide? And 13 votes, we got 92% of people understood the difference. So where do you even start when you're talking about Fukushima nuclear meltdown? There's so many facets you're supposed to cover, right? And so this one is about explaining what nuclear meltdowns are and what that means for people outside the exclusion zone, which is North America right now. Oh, you like this? So this really strange story. The buildings actually blew up. That's Reactor 3. That's the official picture of Reactor 3. Oh, wait a second. And that's the official picture of Reactor 3. Oh, and that's the official picture of Reactor 3. I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? So Reactor 3 was one of the biggest reactors on the planet. It was a mixed oxide fuel facility. And they felt the explosion 25 miles away. At the top of the building were decades and decades of reactor cores. Like I say, were, and they are no more. So how does a building that looks like that end up looking like this? Well, it's public relations. They've done the same thing for Reactor 4. Nobody said nothing. So the building on the right, the official picture, are both of those pictures. Try wrapping your mind around that one. Take a screen capture of that and go out and have a conversation with people. And saying, yeah, no, that's what it looks like at the very top of the building. Everything's okay, go back to sleep. Nuclear, good. Dana, bad. Dana, bad. And so I have a nice argument for people. I'll give it to you real quick. Is there such a thing as quick anymore? Here we go. La 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 la. Oh my Lord. Where do we even start on this subject, right? Here's what I want you to do. If you think I'm wrong, there's a simple way you can prove it. Bear with me. This only takes a second. Okay, here we go. That'll work. What I want you to do is get yourself on down to Japan and write on all of these bags, Dana is wrong. These are 1-ton bags of radiation. And all of those bags, Dana is wrong. Fukushima, write on them. Fukushima food is safe. Stop the fear mongering. The Fukushima food is safe. Stop the fear mongering. Go right on all of those bags over there. Fukushima food is safe. Go on, get on down there. Hurry up. Right on all of these bags, Dana is fear mongering. Now, to give you an idea of the scale of that particular job that we're talking about, I want you to go down and write on all of those bags that Dana is wrong. There's a couple of little things you want to...
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated...
60 million tons. And so if you took each of these bags of 1 ton, if you put them in the back of a pickup truck, a 1-ton pickup truck, and you put them bumper to bumper pickup trucks, that's 10 rows of traffic around the planet. And so I want you to write on every one of those bags, Dana's fear-mongering. Dana is wrong. Or radiation is cool. Put that on the bags. By the way, you'll get a brutal cancer long before you get that far. And how long does it take to write your name 60 million times again? Good luck. So these are the official pictures. So they built this structure with cranes. And this is what used to be a reactor. So like the question you got to ask yourself, of course, if you don't know this subject too well, is, you know, you're obviously now you're more confused than when you got here, but that's okay. We'll get you there. That's a fake picture, but it's the official picture, right? So they put this structure there and put panels on it with cranes, by the way. They built it off-site and brought it in here. It doesn't physically touch the building right there. And then they pretended it looked like that. That was Reactor 4. Remember Reactor 3? I showed you a few minutes ago. But ultimately, this is what it looked like before they put the structure and the panels on it. There was nothing left of the building. The official story is it looks like that. Now, all the media worldwide done that because they were bored. Or they really wanted you to believe that story desperately. It's a fascinating story. Here's one sample of them. And she's going to try to convince you, like many of the journalists have already done, that she's atop 100 feet above the deck that you see over there of that wreckage, whatever you can call it Reactor 4. Now, the question they're doing is because what happened is so dangerous. It's an extinction event for the planet. But she's going to sell you the building to the right and pretend it's the building to the left.
We are here inside Reactor 4.
You got to turn it up, Dana, you moron. I know, right? Can't wait for it.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Okay, so how many people felt for that? If you believe that, then give me a thumbs down on my poll. There can't be anybody that stupid, can there? Oh my God, somebody actually said no. Somebody's actually so stupid. They think that she's on top of the building over there in the fuel pool. Oh my God. That can't be real. Somebody must have done that just to mess with me. Surely to goodness somebody's that stupid. Well, we are talking about nuclear. We are talking about nuclear, Dana, don't you know? Okay, so we're trying to get you up to speed on Reactor 3 and 4 first. Yeah, it's pretty amazing that they want you to believe the picture to the left is the real picture, not the picture to the right. Now, the reason I'll show you the reason why they're so naughty. Is because the radioactive fallout done that. Now, this model is only a 20-day model, and it's not based on the actual meltdowns. It's based on what's known as venting. They didn't vent, they had a tsunami. There's no way to vent, right? Fukushima radioactive fallout, by the way, is global warming, is climate change. And so you can see this industry's bananas, right? Where they pretend it looks like that, not like this. They don't acknowledge that, despite the fact these are all from your major institutions worldwide. Okay, so doomsday-like radiation released to fire and pool at Unit 4. Doomsday-like. Whoa! Like doomsday, dude. Radiation released to fire in a pool at Unit 4 would be a global catastrophe. Well, let's have a look at it. Huh. It would be a global catastrophe. So here's what they mean by... Now, the only way, like, the building's not going to blow up the world, which is what they'll try to say, well, the building could blow up the world, Dana, and then you'll be like, no, I can't, this is bullshit, and you walk away, right? So they like doing stuff like that to you. Now, here's what a doomsday, like radiation release, it would be a global catastrophe, Okay, and so what you're looking at is a model of the planet by France of the cesium-137 radioactive fallout. What makes this model interesting is it's only 16 days model. And in 16 days you covered the planet in radioactive fallout. This is the Pacific, the entire Pacific Ocean. And this is the Atlantic Ocean. This is Canada. I'm currently right here, covered in radioactive fallout, and so are you, no doubt. Now, if the model ran for another couple of days, all of that disappears. All that little tiny bit of weight left there disappears. And if you use the models that I showed you of the buildings, rather, and the inventories of what was in the building in those models, in other words, if they actually showed the stuff that was missing, and all the people you see there, that's me. Each one of the people stood up there is an individual video I had shot and then superimposed it over this picture. Because you would have to exterminate an endless thousands of people every day, and you still can't bring back the radioactive fallout that is felt worldwide. This is another model from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. So they want you to believe the building to the left, by the way, is the building to the right. But it's not. And so the scary part about this is in many folds. First off, that the entire media worldwide has regurgitated that narrative. The debate about this will be banned, no doubt, in the near future. Just like 911, you're not allowed to have that debate on YouTube, for instance, or Google, anywhere, or Facebook, where you're not allowed to question the official story. Debate is no longer acceptable in the northern hemispheres. So we had a major event, and the radioactive fallout has a major event. It exterminates all the species in increments over a few years, and we're currently almost in the year 11. So when you see Fukushima plume model shows 1 million becquerels a square meter on the west coast. A square meter where you stand up and spin around, hold your arms out. Imagine each square meter, you take another step and do the same thing. That's another 1 million becquerels we're talking about in your ground, in your plants, in your water, your pool, or in your children's sandbox. Rain with 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter. These are incredible numbers, and there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129. These are two studies. This is the 129, 220 million atoms in a liter. Of the 129 in the same liter was another 20 million particles of iodine-131. That gets in the thyroid glands of insects and animals, and small mammals, large mammals, and birds and humans, and is converted into radioactive hormone, but on a scale that we don't have any comparisons. This dwarfs Chernobyl. Chernobyl was incredibly brutal, but these numbers dwarf. Let me bring you another model in. Dwarf. So you can imagine 220 million atoms covering the whole continents, the whole oceans, the Pacific, the Atlantic, Europe, Alaska, you name it. And so you slowly in increments for sure. Now, what happens is the female populations are 2 to 3 to 4 times more vulnerable than males. And we've seen a lot of studies over the years, say from weapons fallout, during the peak weapons testing in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, demons. That was a 50-year nuclear war on our planet. The radioactive fallout is the same fallout as a nuclear war. Some of their bombs were equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs going off every second, or in a split second. And what that means is you're talking about 3,800 nuclear weapons detonating at the one time. The radioactive fallout is the same. Whether you use it peaceful, there's no such thing as a peaceful nuclear test, because of the radioactive fallout now indiscriminately attacks all species on the planet. And we've seen after weapons testing worldwide where the male to female sex ratio was changed worldwide. Now these studies we're talking about were on humans, but you can't have that kind of effect on humans without having it even more so on mammals and animals and birds and insects. And they're much more vulnerable. And so they knew this, of course, back in the 50s, the effects that a radioactive fallout would have on species. So you start sterilizing the insects, for instance, quite quickly, and because they have many generations, maybe in a year, compared to a rabbit or something like that, which can have a couple of generations, right? But an insect might have new generations every week. And what happens is they become sterile because of the radiation in the environment they're living in, because of it never stops pulsing energy. This is why we call it climate change, because it's released into the environment, pulsing energy. And so a nuclear meltdown, this is the results of nuclear meltdown, because it's consuming steel and rock and cement and rebar and water, constantly atomizing and aerosoling, ionizing and radiating it at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So you're talking about endless dirty bomb machine, a perpetual disease factories that inflicts, it's the atomic plague. So these meltdowns were quite severe on the eco. I've done research expeditions. We probably won't get to it tonight. But as I showed you earlier on my website, you'll see the before and after pictures of British Columbia, where we've done 6 years of research expeditions for 3 to 4 to 5 months. And it's a 100% extinction event. It was so shocking, so terrifying. We repeated the research year after year, 3 to 4 months at a time away from home on the ocean. Originally went to do species count. There was no species. So then went looking for no aces. Surely there must have been no aces left over up there somewhere. All the way to Alaska from Vancouver, British Columbia. It was a total extinction event. And the glaciers started to disappear. And the postulation on that, of course, is that the radiation stops the ice from crystallizing. But there's another effect that I don't think, the population was counting on, was because it was so radioactive, this stuff got underneath the glaciers also, and started melting it from inside. And what this happened was the wind was able to get in there, which denigrated the integrity of the glaciers, and you started getting huge fractures. Within 5 to 6 years, the glaciers were missing from the Rocky Mountains, all the way from Vancouver to Alaska. And so we documented that. That was just incredibly horrific to see happening, because that regulated the temperatures of the rivers and the estuaries and the streams and the coastlines of the Pacific Ocean. The cold water in droughts would get more melt, right? And that would come down, keep the levels of the river high enough so that migratory animals like steelhead and salmon were still able to come back upstream. And in 2016, we started seeing salmon laying their eggs in the mouth of the estuaries because there wasn't enough water to get up the river. That had never been recorded before. And they didn't know if it would actually work, and apparently it didn't. And so that cold water that would come down, this has been going on for millions of years, all the insects and frogs and all the creatures that lived along the estuaries and lakes and rivers and streams from the Rocky Mountains to the coastline were dependent upon that extra water, that cool water regulating the temperatures. So you started seeing the whole ecosystem attacked from many different directions. And you got confirmation of the actual numbers. You got all the models, the horrific models and actual studies. 1,500 atoms of sulfur per cubic meter detected in the California air. This is TEPCO. They link back to TEPCO's site. That's the official picture of the building to your left. And the people to your right, worldwide, were trying to convince you that they were in the building to the left. And you see the former Japanese ambassador. No single weapon competes with the potential damage from the Fukushima Unit 4.
What I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
Right, I see James Lucid is talking about the ice wall coolant leaking. I'm going to try to cover that one tomorrow night. So instead of putting a real wall down to stop water from coming down the mountain and going into the reactors, they built an ice wall, and they need around $10 billion a year to keep it working. First off, you can't repair an ice wall at a nuclear meltdown. You can't go down and solve the problem because it's a nuclear meltdown. Multiple nuclear meltdowns there. And so it's a distraction to make you believe, and of course they say in the official story that it's not going to affect the integrity of the ice wall, that it takes 3 months for it to defrost before you can start having radioactive water or water coming through it. And this is ludicrous. We got an incredible amount of documentation saying that it's not functional at all. So instead of building a real wall, just put sheets of aluminum down in the ground. That'll be the end of it, right? And pretty simple. So you got all the media worldwide, no universities, no academics of any discipline, asking them, saying, hey, wait a second, they're not inside of the building's fuel pool of Reactor 4. It doesn't exist. Explosion at Fukushima U1, 3, and 4 may have caused fuel rods to be lost from the spent fuel pools. The spent fuel pools were supposed to be at the top of these buildings. Hang on here, we smurfed this up today or something. There's a Model 3 coming up. So reactor 3, for instance, the fuel pools are at the top of the building. These fuel pools are full of reactor cores. Those fuel pools have no containment, and they boil off, because the fuel is still hot, they boil off about 120,000 liters a day. That's released up to tall, skinny chimneys all day, 24 hours a day, for about 100 years at the plant until they move it somewhere else. It's the same power the reactor. So the reactor, in order to boil water, it splits atoms. And one atom is really, really bad for any species on the planet, including humans, if it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. And so the head of a needle, you can put 2 million atoms, and each one of them are capable of giving you up to one of 1,800 or more diseases, not just cancer. So imagine how many atoms you have to split to boil water. Now the short-lived isotopes don't have enough energy to boil water. They need the harsh stuff, right? So the reactor is designed to produce plutonium on an unimaginable scale, and uranium-235 to keep this chain reaction active. And it doesn't have to try very hard. Once you put it into motion, you can't switch it off. So when it goes in the fuel pool, instead of producing power for 1 million homes with atoms, it produces power for 1 million homes, and it goes up the chimneys into your farmers' fields. The majority of them are surrounded by farms, active farms, to get rid of the bioaccumulation of the radiation. And the rest of it goes all around the planet, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. And there's 1,000 of these pools worldwide. Every 24 hours, they're releasing hundreds of trillions and trillions of atoms each day, of long-lived atoms that will continue to pulse energy for millions of years. And so this is a perpetual genocide machine. At some point, this will exterminate all species on the planet, even without the nuclear meltdowns, just the fuel pools. And so when you talk about nuclear waste, they don't tell you the problem, why nuclear waste is so dangerous. They say, well, there's no solution for it. But that's because they don't want to tell you the truth. Otherwise, you immediately demand they stop nuclear. And so they're very, as you've seen, right, where they had no problem
My understanding is on top of what
having all of these people pretending they're on a building that don't even exist, not because they're bored or not because they can, but because they don't want you to understand. They're desperate for you not to understand. And if you don't find me, you most likely will never understand these facets. Certainly you'll never see a picture like that anywhere else. So reactor 3, the fuel pools are at the top of the building. There is no building left over there in reactor 3. And they claim that it's hunky-dory and they got the fuel out of that, and then it looks like this. These are incredible lies, and each of these reactors are a minimum of 100 Chernobyls. Let me see if I can find it for you. Because we cover so many facets of the nuclear industry, this narrative kind of gets lost in the chaos, right? And so every once in a while I got to do a video like this where I break down real details. So this was the day after the tsunami.
The fact that the...
I apologize, hang on. Because when I bring a video in, sometimes I can't touch the audio for a few moments. I should wait.
Reactor in Japan is 100 times more powerful than the one in Chernobyl, and
is 100 times more powerful, energy production-wise, than the one in Chernobyl. But Chernobyl was mostly graphite. It was 200 tons. These are 800 tons. But they're pure uranium and pure plutonium. So there's thousands of more inventory than Chernobyl had. Thousands of times of more cesium, americium, plutonium. These are dangerous particles. And you can see when reactor 3 is gone, reactor 4 is gone. You're looking at least 12 million pounds per building. That's just counting the 2 fuel pools. So Arnie Gunnarsson made the assemblies for the fuel pools. And he's pretending that the building looks like it would do behind him. I put both pictures there because they're both official pictures. Arnie refuses to acknowledge that the building to the left is not real. Again, that's just all of those. I got Rockster and Fukushima workers stuffed there to cover up the hole. It was just a morbid understanding of what's really takes to. And so they built this structure. You can see it doesn't physically touch it, and it doesn't touch it above either, because obviously this was a 190-foot building. So they put these big panels on with the crane, and you can see inside of it right now. It can't look like that. You know, once you put the panels around it, it went from looking like this to looking like that. And so all the world told you that same story, not because they're stupid or gullible, but because they desperately want you to believe that narrative. Because it's pretty obvious that they hate you, they despise you, they have nothing but contempt for you, and animosity for you, towards you. This is the plutonium-239 dispersal, and the data is based upon TEPCO's data. This is a fake picture. You will, or it could be real. You will die that day if that's a real picture. And the fuel pools were at the very top of 190-foot buildings, and so that's the top of reactor 4. It's obviously not a 190-foot building anymore. They've done the same thing with reactor 3. You can see the guts of inside of reactor 3. And way over there, you can see the building had been damaged. So this structure they built here doesn't physically touch reactor 3. It's 177 feet tall. It was built off-site and brought in and put together with cranes. So that's what they've done with both of these buildings. Reactor 3 is here and reactor 4 over there. Was he brought in these structures to cover it up and then pretended everything was okay. These won't be okay in 10,000 years. The buildings will denigrate and disappear from multiple earthquakes. And this is why it's a big deal when you have an earthquake around Fukushima, is you can start another nuclear meltdown known as a recriticality and a sustained chain reaction, ongoing chain reaction. So they built these structures to pretend last year, or 2020, that they got the fuel out of the pools, which would have been at the very top of the building. So there's nothing left of the buildings. They built the structure on top over the remains of the buildings. And when you zoom in, you can see there is no integrity, no building left there. They pretend it looks like that when it actually is completely destroyed. You can never go inside of it. It's incredible doses. We call these buildings Medusas because if you stand there and stare at it a few minutes, you're probably going to die that week or that month. If you stay there for 5 minutes, you're probably going to die that day. So everything is done by cranes. The whole idea of this was to trick and deceive and manipulate the population. And they've done a good job. There is no opposition. Greenpeace is controlled opposition. Greenpeace refuses to say, hey, wait a second, that's not real. Let me show you what I mean by that. Imagine if Greenpeace tweeted out that picture there and said, hey, CBS, BBC, CNN, ABC are not in the fuel pool at Reactor 4, folks. Just imagine, right? I'll do that again. Just imagine if Greenpeace was to tweet out the picture to all of its millions of users that CBS, BBC, CNN, and ABC had all faked the building to the left. And the reason they faked it is because the radioactive fallout is covering the planet and killing all the species. That would be the end of the nuclear industry in a hurry, yeah? Well, I tweeted the pictures to Greenpeace at least 40 times. I'm very polite. Despite the fact that they're very rude. Okay. So both of those buildings you're looking at, actually both of them, they're right there, where they built these fake structures and then pretended everything was gorgeous. I mean, Reactor 3, that's all that's left of it. There's nothing left of the 190-foot original building. So they just built a structure around it and then faked the videos. I think this was the final render of how they fixed Reactor 4. They stuffed the holes with the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. The building you're looking at now is in a very unusual picture. You're not going to see this picture anywhere else. And this was extrapolated from a high-quality picture a couple of years ago from a major Japanese media. And I got a tendency to collect a lot of these pictures. And I seen that picture was very high quality, and I was like, ooh, can I actually zoom in and get a clean shot? It's very difficult to get a... You'll never see this shot because this is a zoom, and the next number of shots you'll never see, including these. You won't see these shots anywhere else either. But these came out clean, and holy smokes, look at the debris. Why didn't they clean up that debris? Well, because it's a lethal dose. You can't clean it up. And that's why they faked it, both of those reactors the way they did. It's unbelievable, eh? And it's very bad news for the entire planet. We got a little video I'm going to play for you. Maybe. If I can get it to work. So last 3 days I've been out looking for birds or any kind of animal movement, but because we got fresh snow, if there's any recent movements, we would see the tracks. If there's any rabbits, you would see the tracks at least. And on Saturday, well, I put a video on my site, a really bad one apparently, but Saturday I was going across the bog and there was a big hole and I crashed down through it. Broke the windshield with my head and flooded the engine. And today now the engine's bogged down. It's been heavy minus temperatures, so I'm hoping it's just water's in the breather and it's just frozen. But I was out yesterday and the motor would bog down whenever I tried to give it, because it was deep snow, and a few spots I had to really hit the throttle it bogged down on me, almost left me stranded. And but anyway, I went nose down into this bog hole. Lucky for me, I never travel very fast. But sometimes you got to give it a lot of power to get out of a hole, right? But I crashed through the ice and went down about 4 feet. And I thought I might be able to crawl out of there because these are quads. So put the power to the quad and that didn't work. So this is the first pictures from the new gimbal that we'll be using this summer and spring full time. She's full of bog material. So all the way above the lights to the bottom of the box underwater in the back. And then on the front it was the same thing. Everything's covered in mud. And I split the windshield and took a pretty good smash. And it doesn't do you justice, but that's the first shots from the new gimbal. Eh? Beautiful pictures, or video. Just stunning. It's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous footage. I was totally shocked. This is after I got home. So I went in the house, got the gimbal right away. But what I figured happened was, anytime you're ready, Dana. What I figured must have happened because the rear lights were underwater at one point because I was able to get the nose to come up because that's where the winch was. And so here I was nose down. I was disoriented. I just broke the windshield with my head and my face. And lucky for me, I wasn't going very fast. And the winch is now 4 feet underwater. So worst case scenario, I was just trying to get the nose to come up, get the engine up. But the problem was, it was minus 17. And I was now pretty quickly, because I got off the quad, and I went, and one leg, I went almost up to my crotch and had to put my other leg halfway down to get out of it. I have to get back on it and try to get out of there in desperation. That didn't work. There was nowhere at the time to put hook the winch up to. So I decided to run the winch behind me, and I had found a rock. I was going to hook it around that. But in my panic, because I had free-spooled to get the winch pulled out, I forgot to lock the free-spool back in. It wouldn't have mattered because I couldn't have got out of there, but it was still a bit of a nightmare for me. And I finally called a friend. They sent in a couple of quads. The quads couldn't get me. They had to go around the mountain and come back in head on towards me and drag me out from... At this point now, I've got the winch working. And just that moment, really, when they were coming down the hill, I figured out what happened with the winch. Moved the tow rope around to the front of me, and they were up in front of me, and tried to winch myself up, but I was pulling them towards me. Minus 17. Finally, anyway, the winch did pull me out, because the winch is a new winch I put on. It's 4,500 pounds. The winch can drag 5 times the weight. It's a really powerful winch, and it worked like damn once it's got its footing. But I got water in the system. And we're going to have to raise money so I can put it in the shop and get it cleaned up. Because I can't figure out why it's bogging down. Water got in there somewhere. We need it up and running because we're doing research expeditions. So probably a couple of $100. When we raise a couple of $100, we'll get it in the shop. I'm going to have to bring it down. Now we're going to have another 10 centimeters of snow right now, tonight, as we're speaking. And I can't get in tomorrow to check for tracks. So that's not good. And so I'm motivated to get it obviously up and running again because you got to get on top of it. Let's keep going. But anyway, we found no species in 3 days. Right, and I posted a couple of videos. And there might be another video there. Hang on. Hang on. Ooh. Let's see very quick if I can find that other video. And I probably can't. Who knows, Dana? No, that's just another one of those. We've seen this one already. But the gimbal takes a surreal picture always, too. Because that's the gimbal from the drone, that one. Where the other one was the handheld gimbal. Because we got most of the parts finally sewed up. Oh, well. Let's keep going. So, that's a pretty disappointing, pretty burnt out from the whole experience on top of that. Okay, so another facet of the Fukushima nuclear meltdown, because we've done all kinds of research expeditions, the species are actually missing on our planet, and we do die-off mortality videos of abnormalities where all the species are emaciated. All different species, you name it, and we got all kinds of presentations on them being shown up for the first time in history, emaciated everywhere. So here's other headlines. So this is where this is evidence of China syndrome, where some of the reactor cores have gone down into the earth and hit the water table at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. When it hits water, water evaporates and expands at 1,400 foot per liter. So you can imagine 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperature, 1,000 tons going down and hitting a water table. It splits the earth, and the steam coming out of the earth now is lethal doses. This was sustained for several years. So they couldn't actually work at this site for a couple of years. And we have a lot of documentation of that, by the way. So 4.7 sieverts per hour is 20% more than in June. This was October. So June, July, August, September, October is 5 months of lethal steam coming out of cracks in the ground. Now what that means though is the steam, the whole site will eventually disappear in lethal doses of steam. Massive radioactive releases going on for 3 years. The visible steam, because you need perfect conditions to actually see the emissions to show up like steam, because it's warm, outside temperature is cold. That's when you typically will see steam, but it's still coming. Just the tip of the iceberg. The containment vessels are broken. As I showed you, the reactors are actually completely ejected out of the buildings. They're not broken, they're gone. Multiple pieces. This is disturbing. We're going to say the ground on our Fukushima plant is cracking and the radioactive steam is coming up, or something like steam. And that they have stationary Geiger counters. Now the video to your right is 40 times the normal speed. The whole site is a lethal dose in airborne plumes. And the Geiger counters were maxed out at 10 sieverts an hour. 10 sieverts is, say 10 sieverts an hour coming from an object this size is a lethal dose from quite a distance. 10 sieverts an hour in airborne, your whole site is now not 10 sieverts an hour. Think of it as 10 sieverts per, say, cubic meter. Let's stretch it way out of shape and say, because it's probably 100 sieverts per cubic meter of air. But just say 10 sieverts per cubic meter of air. The whole site, this stuff lands, everything it touches becomes extremely, unbelievably, because we're talking about fuel particulates that's causing these kinds of numbers. it's a death. The whole site is a death zone, basically. This is why you're not seeing nuclear scientists. Nuclear scientists have never went there. Nuclear academics have never actually went there. There's no evidence to show they were actually physically there. But there is a lot of evidence to show that only the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language are being exterminated there. 2 sieverts an hour from the water, which meant that the tanks, they got allegedly 1,000 tanks, means the tanks are 1.4 million sieverts. 10 sieverts is a lethal dose from quite a distance. The tanks are not thick enough to shield you. So then what's going on? Well, the tanks were built to trick you into thinking they weren't poisoning the Pacific. You can't actually fill the tank up with this stuff. I'll show you what I mean. By the way, there's 1,000 kinds of radioactive isotopes. It's not just cesium or iodines. Fukushima radioactive tanks may have already been emptied into the Pacific Ocean. Well, the tanks were built very frivolously. The contents of the 1,000 radioactive tanks, September the 10th, 2013. Now on the site, there's this effect from the radioactive fallout. It's a breaking effect. So you got all these radioactive fallout that kind of, you can't see it, but think of snowflakes that are pulsing energy 20, 30, 40 feet away from them in every direction. And now think you got hundreds and hundreds of billions of these at any given moment. If you could physically see it, that's what you would see. It as an invisible snowstorm of this stuff. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light. They hit each other at the speed of light and they change direction. That's known as a braking effect. But almost at the speed of light, almost at 186,000 miles per second. And when they change direction, they create another effect along with that particular effect, which is called X-rays. It's a special kind of X-rays. It's insidiously powerful, and it's a death sentence for anybody that's actually on the site itself. So 2 sieverts an hour of better radiation. We counted the tanks in better pictures, and we only can count 750 tanks. Now remember, I just showed you in 2013 they allegedly had 1,000 tanks. Worse yet, the bolts in Fukushima tanks will corrode in just a few years. So the tanks were built to trick you into thinking that they didn't contaminate the Pacific Ocean, when of course they contaminated the entire planet immediately. But the idea is to make you not think of that, not acknowledge that, make you think that it's only the tritium, allegedly, that was in the tanks that you got to worry about, and that's what the fight is about. So China and South Korea are both participating in that deception.
Lewis!
Oh yeah, let's play that.
Lewis! 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 Mom! 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 Mommy! 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 Mama! 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 Ma! 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 Mom! 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 Mommy! Mommy! Mama! 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 What? Hi.
Right, and so these tanks are actually empty. If you fill up the tanks, you can't build another tank there. So, and if you fill up all the tanks, you can't get back on the site. So here we go. In 2013, in August, I just showed you September. In August, they claimed they had 1,000 tanks. In March 2014, they claimed they had 1,200 tanks. And in November 2014, they claimed they had 1,000 tanks. In 2017, they claimed they had 900 tanks. And in 2019, they claimed they had 1,000 tanks. And in 2021, last year, they claimed they had 1,000 tanks. Now this year, they're claiming they got 1,000 tanks. So they had 1,000 tanks in 2013 and 1,000 tanks in 2014. We counted the tanks, there was only 750. So I think the next poll we does is, do anybody really think TEPCO has 1,000 tanks? And does anybody believe any of them are full? You can't fill the tanks up even at 1 sievert per hour because the tanks are not thick enough to shield you. Because you're talking about fuel. And the fuel would gather up in the bottom of the tanks, start a bombardment of neutrons, and a chain reaction, you would burn a hole through the tank immediately and it would lose its entire inventory. So think about these headlines for a power plant. Not for a coal plant or oil plant or gas plant. The emissions don't have these attributes. But for nuclear, the resulting destruction could take half the planet with it. But what's it going to do to the host country? This is really important stuff. Okay, so nothing like this has ever been attempted, said the Yale professor. All of humanity will be threatened for thousands of years if the rods in the fuel pools of number 4 touch. Well, that's the fuel pools. That's the building they're talking about. It's supposed to be the same height as this one. And the touch is gone. So all of humanity is now threatened for thousands of years. Now, right after the meltdown, the Nuclear Regulatory and International Atomic Energy Agency was called into Congress to explain what the hell was going on at Fukushima. And so they brought in Bill Bouchard while they were waiting for their top guy to show up. And I chopped the video up because of time constraint, but here's the gist of it.
We're here to get a briefing on the ongoing crisis associated with the nuclear power plants in Japan. I'm very privileged that we have the executive director for operations at the NRC here, Bill Borchardt.
I couldn't speculate on that.
An expert, a true expert as well.
Again, I wouldn't wish to speculate.
So we feel very blessed that you could come and stand in until the chairman comes, and we really do welcome you.
Again, I can't speculate.
Well, teaching all of us the lessons that we have to take away from what is happening.
I couldn't speculate on that. What we believe is a significant amount of fuel damage in the 3 operating reactors, units 1, 2, and 3, which were operating at the time of the earthquake. And then because of the spent fuel problems that are in Unit 4 of that reactor facility. All of those factors taken into combination, if that same type of source term, that same type of radiological problem existed in the United States, our recommendation to state governments would be to evacuate out to 50 miles.
Well, that's a really good point, because I'm asking you, do you know how many people live within 50 miles of San Onofre nuclear power plant?
I do not know.
Well, I'm going to tell you how many people. 7.4 million people.
So it was on the 16th when that video was made. So Chernobyl was really small compared to any of the reactors in Japan. But 3 million children require treatment because of Chernobyl. Many will die prematurely. United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2000 on the podium. So 3 million children, like when you get injured from radiation, it's actually poison, but Congress lacks the authority to make it a crime to poison you with radiation. Actually, I put an article about that the weekend up at my site, thenuclearproctologist.org. And I linked to that article for everybody. Congress lacks the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Try making that one up on your own. So that's the official one.
The reactors at the Fukushima plant were damaged by the initial earthquake and not the tsunami wave. Well, given that earthquakes are commonplace in Japan, what does this say about the safety of the rest of Japan's nuclear reactors?
They're both the official pictures. She said it was damaged by the earthquake before the tsunami. Reactor 1 started melting down before the tsunami came in there. Within 3 hours, it was melted down. Fukushima top scientist, this is David Suzuki. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine. He's talking about the nuclear power plants in Japan. That I seen a paper that said it's bye-bye Japan and should evacuate the North America's west coast if Reactor 4 goes, not the fuel pool, if Reactor 4 goes, oh yeah, I guess fuel pool. I'll play the clip for you. So think of your power plant having these types of attributes. The pictures to the right are pictures I put there to articulate what they're talking about. So when you talk about the fuel pool, they're the red depictions at the top of the building that don't exist anymore, which is Reactor 4. But think about how scary it is that it can invoke these kind of connotations.
3 out of the 4 plants were destroyed in the earthquake and in the tsunami. The 4th one has been so badly damaged that the fear is if there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the 4th plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate. Now, if that isn't terrifying, I don't know what. Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine.
Fukushima is the most terrifying situation you can imagine. That if the fuel pools go, it's bye-bye Japan. So you can look to the left is Reactor 4. The fuel pools are gone. Bye-bye Japan. Don't eat food from Japan. Don't be stupid. So in case of a fire at a spent nuclear fuel pool in South Korea, 24 million people would need to be evacuated. 24 million. What they said was that up to 67,000 square miles of Japan soil would be contaminated. As for South Korea, the plant could taint more than half of the nation by contaminating up to 54,000 square kilometers. Well, as I showed you, Japan has 2. That's because I never showed you Reactor 1 or Reactor 2 yet, right? They also melted down and lost their fuel pools too. It gets worse. A fuel pool. Now these fuel pools that have the ability to evacuate 54,000 square kilometers, if that fuel pool here catches fire, loses its water and catches fire, that happens automatically if there's no water. So they're talking about a big volume of material, right? That's going to contaminate almost 60,000 square kilometers. But they're also saying that people in China, 5 million in China, and 8 million in Japan will have to evacuate if they have a fire at this fuel pool in South Korea. Okay, so all day long that fuel pool is still hemorrhaging, still splitting the atoms that would normally power, because you have decades of reactor cores, and each reactor core powered 1 million homes. And so each day still produces the same atoms for each lot. Do you get it? So to say there's 4 decades of reactor core. Reactor cores are good for around 16 months or something. And then they go into a fuel pool. It's still splitting the same atoms, and these atoms are no longer contained. It's released into the environment all day, every day. These are genocide machines. These are 100% genocide. Now, that's 4 sides of Reactor 4. The building is completely destroyed on all 4 sides. And the people in the bottom right-hand side are pretending that everything is normal. So there was a common spent fuel pool in Japan, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, that was on the ground, lower than was at the same level as the floor level of the reactors themselves. That had 6,000, had almost 10 million pounds. So these pictures here are screen captures that were released in 2021 in January of a drone. Now these pictures were from way up in the sky, but they were very high quality. And so I zoomed in on every picture, which is what I do with, and I have this story you'll find in my playlist. It's a single video of these pictures from last year. And I was totally shocked that when I zoomed in, everything was redacted. So this was really interesting because this is an unusual picture where you can see top of reactor 2 and part of reactor 1 over right there. It was very rare to get that clean of a glimpse for the rest of the pictures. But this is on the same side of the building as where reactor's common spent fuel pool is. And I'll show you. Again, you're seeing everything pixelated, redacted. Now, these were released last year, 10 years, on the 10th anniversary, or in January of the 10th anniversary that year, which was 2021. These pictures. And so they look like this. So you're quite a long ways away and everything looks normal. You're in a drone looking down. That looks pretty normal, right? You're looking at damage. And this was one of the very rare pictures where they showed us parts of the reactor. This is the original picture series. But then everything became pixelated after those couple of pictures. Everything. Which was really interesting because that's reactor 2, all pixelated. Now you can see its emissions are coming out the side of it. And that's reactor 1 behind me. Now up there is the common spent fuel pool. But you can see everything is pixelated heavily. And the roofs are pixelated incredibly. Completely grayed out. And everything else is pixelated. So that had 10 million pounds. That was at ground level. And you can start to see in the very top and the back of the building, again, you're going away from the ocean. This is the common spent fuel pool. In the back of it is transport truck containers washed all up into the corner there. So you can imagine the energy of 30, 40 foot high seas coming through here. It would have went straight through the common spent fuel pools. And that's why we see pixelated pictures. Also, as you head over to reactor 5 and 6, again, this back in the reactor, this is now we're going towards reactor 4 is right here. 4 is right there. This is the common spent fuel pool coming in from the drone. Now I zoomed in to get these extractions each time. So that's the common spent fuel pool, reactor 4. But why did they blot out all the road? And not the containers in the very back. So as you start going through the pictures, you realize that they released these pictures as a warning for people because the industry won't tell the truth. And so these pictures were unceremoniously released, and you had to zoom in to understand what was going on, that everything was pixelated. And we've never seen that before, that these pictures like this released. This was total panic. And so it's extraordinary that they released these pictures. These are incredibly important pictures because they tell a story that there was a cover-up, and that's why they waited 10 years to release these pictures. And the cover-up was the common spent fuel pool had obviously melted down, and then reactor 6 apparently must have melted down too, and we should get to that in a minute. Again, this is the drone up very high, right? And when you look at the reactors in the top right-hand corner, it doesn't mean much to you, see? But as you zoom in, you start to realize, what the hell am I looking at? So reactor 5 and 6 are separated from these reactors. That's the common spent fuel pool in the top center. It's amazing the cover-up of this. Participated in all universities and all medias worldwide. All government agencies have been, and the regulatory agencies have all been captured by this demonic, self-centered planet killer known as the nuclear industry. The people that work for the nuclear industry are they're paid a lot of money, and so they're very... Now, the building in your bottom, this was the dry cask storage right here. You see that tank up there? See how crumbled that is? That's because it was submerged underwater, and every 33 feet is 14.28 pounds per square inch. And that's what would happen if you lowered a can down into the ocean. It would collapse like that. Those big tanks had. This was a common storage pool, or dry cask storage. And we do have some footage with that, and I've done a 5-part series about almost 2,000 pictures that got released in 2013. There's another playlist on my site. Now we're headed over to reactor 5 and 6. You can see the damage. That damage you see there is on compression damage from the ocean totally burying it. Now up in the top center is reactor, the closest one to you is reactor 5. And that's another picture of those, the common, or the storage, dry storage pool. Now 5 and 6. 5, you can see 5. But 6, you can see the pump house is completely pixelated and grayed out. And reactor 6 is pixelated and grayed out. And the stack for the fuel pools emissions is also, for the incinerator they have on the site, is pixelated out. And there's only one reason you're going to do something like that, is because you had a meltdown. There's zero reason to pixelate the entire... And look how heavily they pixelated the pump house, which is downhill. You see the enormous amount of damage right close to it. So you can imagine that damage translate into the reactors themselves. Now these reactors, the beams of them, you can actually turn a full-size SUV around on the beam itself. It gives you the integrity of these buildings. These were designed, right, not to, you can't stop the reactor from melting down, but the buildings were designed to pretend that and then the cover story comes out, oh no, there was no meltdown. And they cover it up, which they've done successfully many places worldwide, by the way, covered up nuclear meltdowns. So it was really shocking, and you'll find the link to the original pictures in my playlist of these pictures, by the way. You can download them and peruse them yourselves. I think it's stunning that somebody released these particular pictures and that nobody had caught on that if you zoomed in, everything was pixelated. Nobody told that story even today. This is the only renditions of this story in these pictures. Nobody's ever come out and flushed out the pictures for you. So they pretend in 2013 that everything is perfectly okay, but those who are educated in the ways of nuclear understood there was no building left. The complete integrity was gone. In 2018, they even tried to push the same picture down everybody's throats. In 2014, halfway point for Fukushima fuel transfer. In 2014. Right, in 2014, it actually looked like this, but they had put cranes had put a cover over it that I showed you earlier. People had pretended they were in there, but it certainly, even physics.org in 2007 was stabbing you in the back every chance they got. Then he had stories like airplane crashes so, they gave the illusions that the fuel pools were there. Why would he write a story like that if the fuel pool wasn't there? Well, I'm not a scumbag, so it's hard to think like them, but it's not there. That's the official picture. And at the same time, that's the official picture. So the nuclear industry, instant reaction is, how evil can I be? Still not enough power to run crucial machinery at the nuclear meltdown. This is what it would have looked like. Yeah, like... this is not... They didn't hide this because they were bored. They didn't go through all that trouble because they were bored. They went through all this trouble because it's an extinction level event. I counted the tanks, and there's not 1,000 tanks there. And the cover-up went very deep and very wide. In fact, if you read that stories there, thumbs down for Durnford is a grotesque attack on environmentalists by Yoshi Shimatsu. I've done a radio show with him every Sunday for 2 years. He was the ex-editor of the Japanese Times. Wednesday, the 21st of September 2016, goes down as the darkest hour and a total eclipse for justice in Canada and environmental cause throughout the Northern Hemisphere. And the guilty verdict against Dana Durnford is a perversion of the legal norms that condemn the Canadian government to be in the Great Banana Republic of the North, enslaved servitude to the global nuclear industry and its own uranium mining profiteers. And so he done a great article in defense of me, and he pointed fingers and name-shamed them, but the world was hoodwinked by the universities and the medias. They've been pushing nuclear for a very long time. The problem is that the radioactive fallout has condemned us, and they're going to blame the illnesses from this on coronaviruses and its many itinerations of it. They shipped food immediately. Within 3 months, they continued to ship food in Canada while the rest of the planet banned it, which meant that Canada had to take a big load because nobody else wanted the food. And it's an unbelievable, monstrous, insidious, criminal betrayal to do something like that. And so you will get sick even without shipping the food into countries. But they're obviously gone genocidal, suicidal pack on this planet. The nuclear industry, that is. We launched expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way up to Alaska. 4 to 5 months a year, each year, year after year. Doing species counts.
We're leaving Port Hardy.
Doing species counts.
Port Hardy. Rather than take a chance.
Doing species counts year after year. And to our unbelievable horror, we discovered that it's an extinction event. To your left is what it should look like. To your right is what it does look like. These are authentic before and after pictures. You can see all the species are gone. So imagine birds would normally fly by and go down and land on the beach to your left. And it was easy to find a meal, high tide or low tide. It was mindless. There was food everywhere. Now everything is sterilized. They sterilized the entire ocean. And that's the incubator, that's the nursery of the Pacific Ocean is your tidal zones. So those species now are permanently exterminated. It's absurd. There used to be enough protein there to feed the entire planet pre-Fukushima in the tidal zones. They exterminated it on purpose. This was done on purpose. They didn't try to stop the nuclear meltdown and the radioactivity of the Pacific Ocean. The airborne done it in just a couple of days. You'll never take the pictures to your left again. It'll never happen.
Hey, Zoe.
This is just a few miles from Alaska. We're 10
and a few waves right here.
Alaska. Year after year, me and my trusty little dog Zoe, my stoic little dog Zoe, and these are the size of your thumbnails. These are one of 78 species of green sea anemones, but these are babies. This is a really unusual picture when it should be a normal picture. And we've done research now year after year after year after year in desperation that the world will choose a better way and try to find a way forward. So in the last couple of years, we've seen headlines where 6,000 gray whales have died, for instance. We see a mortality event for pretty well every species of whales, and owls, and caribous, and insects, and you name it. But we're seeing all the whales emaciated, all the species, beaching absurd numbers in every species. We have confirmation of the radioactive fallout emissions from many different modeling and academic studies. This model also is a Neptunian model of the radioactive fallout covering the world. We have many different models of many different isotopes. Cesium remains dispersed throughout the water column from the surface to the ocean floor, May 29, 2012. But you're fighting the day over empty tanks. I actually got presentations on my site. They might be in my playlist of the tanks. And if you want to learn more about that, I've done entire shows just on the tanks, in case the world was going to come to its senses. The information I provide you is unassailable. This is the real deal. I provide you with the documentation that you can beat these people in court any day of the week. Not maybe, not almost, but unequivocally. Woo! We'll call it a night, I suppose. I'm pretty burnt out. I'm disappointed with the bike today. I mean, but that's the problem, right? You go and you do the research and something goes wrong. You don't know when you're going to get back out there and do more research. That to me is terrifying. And it is what it is. I'm unfortunately used to it. I'll show you how you can donate if you're trying. There's only 2 ways you can donate. Underneath my video, there'll be a dialog box. If you don't see that, just there's a dialog box you can open up. That's directly to my PayPal, to Dana Durnford. That's the only Dana Durnford that you can donate to on PayPal, is that link right there. And this link right here is to my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. You can see the donate button there. Just let it finish loading. And underneath the first picture, you'll see a donate button. And you just click that and you can donate directly to me at my website with credit cards. Or you can donate with PayPal by clicking on PayPal me/Dana Durnford. That is directly to my account. That is directly to my PayPal. Oh, we still got poll. We're going to end the poll. 41 votes is Fukushima Daiichi meltdowns. Radioactive nuclear fallout behind the mass die-off. And I've showed you all the documentation for you to make a proper assessment and to make informed decisions from here on out. So the worst case scenario, at least you understand. And the people that do watch these presentations are the most informed people on the planet of this subject. Bar nobody. There's nobody better with more knowledge than you folks have of this actual event. And of course, it's all meant to change the future so that you and your friends and your families and your loved ones can have a future. Somebody has to be out here telling the truth, and the truth has a heavy burden to pay. I've been isolated and segregated and assaulted many times, physically assaulted. I've been attacked and I've been ridiculed and I've been convicted of crimes I'm not guilty of, against people that deserve to be held accountable and might probably very well be held accountable in the near future. But of course we cover, now since the last show, this is over 600 headlines that I got picked up. It's overwhelming. You can't keep up with it. And tomorrow night we're going to try to slice into some of that. And so, let me say goodnight. Quick shout out, I guess, hey? Let's go up to the beginning. In the comments section, do a quick shout out to everybody else. Hello, everybody worldwide, and hugs for everybody. And for those in the comments section, let me say hi to those people that were able to show up. Dana Nasana, Richard McCann, Peace Weir, Chet Austin. I only serve one king. Good night, everybody. Ella, Ease, James Lucet. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. A great day tomorrow. I'm just going to scroll down. Nancy Smith. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, hopefully. John 2H. Albert. Good night, everyone. Colette S. Thank you, Colette. Robert Bogg. James Megan. I think Jeffrey, or no. Seen little mirages on the external here. Just a quick good night to everybody before we call it a show. So the story was kind of get you up to speed on Fukushima. I didn't show you anything on Reactor 1 and 2. I apologize for that. They're 100% meltdowns, melt-throughs, melt-out, and lost their reactor cores that were stored in the fuel pools for decades also. They're the same scenarios, Reactor 3 and 4, that I did show you. And Reactor 6 appears to be gone. Port Angeles, Christopher. Let me see, did we get down through it? Chelsea. I don't check down my emails very often, Chelsea. I've been under siege for so long. I really got to get back into it. No, I didn't. Yeah, thanks Dana Nasana for moderating. I'm just double checking a few names, just in case I missed anybody. I'll read people's comments after though. Once I come to a stop. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. There's no wildlife out in our woods, and we've done expeditions the last couple of years in the woods going across the province. The spiders are gone in the summer times. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. I'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow night. I'm usually pretty good. I got burnt out. We've done a lot of work in the last couple of weeks. And out in the woods for the last 3 days, soaking wet, and frozen and cold, and crashing through the ice and everything else. Now we got engine trouble. That gives you, it puts the stress level up there, that's for sure. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, folks.